Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Rebecca Pearl. I work for AARP Elder Watch. And today we're going to talk about addressing the unique experiences women have with finances. And there are quite a few statistics in this presentation because we are looking at mainly the wage gap and also a bit of the wealth gap that's in this country. And we're going to get into the details of all of that as we go through. But just wanted to let you know it is a bit number heavy. If you want to take notes, please feel free. But again, it will be recorded, posted to YouTube. It will be recorded and posted to YouTube. And also closed captioning is on. So if you want to use that, you are able to. I think you can just go to your little control panel and click view closed captions. It should pop up. And before we get started with the good stuff, I just want to give a little overview of what AARP Elder Watch is. We are a 20-year partnership with the Colorado Attorney General's office that does education and outreach across Colorado. Our education and outreach oftentimes looks like these presentations. We also have a volunteer staffed fraud victim support helpline. So if you, someone you know, is a victim of a fraud or scam or just has questions about fraud, scams, finances, we are happy to chat with you. We also have a peer-to-peer financial counseling program, and more details are available if you want to give us a call. It's 800-222-4444, option number 2. So this is interactive. If you want to ask questions throughout, that is totally fine. Again, feel free to take notes. I do have copies of the slides available if you'd like. Just feel free to contact me and I'll send everything your way. This is not financial advice. And I guess I have to say that all the time, like for all the presentations, but this one is literally really not financial advice. We are just going over some of the barriers to women's financial equality, right? So consult with a lawyer and certified financial planner before making any final decisions, please. Oh, and I'm sorry, before we get into the numbers, if you do have questions and don't want to speak, or you don't want to wait until the end to type in your question, feel free to throw it in the chat and then I'll look at all of them in the end and address them then. So the gender wealth gap is actually largest among the population that makes the smallest amount of incomes. And I was very surprised to find out that 57% of women earn less than $25,000 a year, which is below the poverty levels in most places in the United States. And that's compared to 45% of men. So we already see this stark disparity, and that those are with the smallest incomes, right? And it just kind of, the inequality at that level is very, very broad. And then it gets a bit more specific, where we see that 2% of women earn more than $150,000 a year compared to 6% of men. So that disparity is like a lot less, but there's such a small amount of women earning that much money that it still is just quite unequal. And so 2/3 of women work in low wage occupations. And these are also the jobs and careers that oftentimes, and we'll talk about this at the end, women are pointed in the direction of, because it's just historically seen as women's work to do childcare, be a maid, serve, and be personal care assistants. And those are oftentimes some of the lowest paying jobs. So that is just something that we see, that a lot of women are engaging in that work and then also making a lot less money than men with the same amount of education also. Men also see this just steady, so this is really interesting, the age, how old you are and how long you work is gonna make your salary a different, and either it's going to go up or down, fluctuate as you go on. And men see this very steady increase in salary from the ages of 16, right? So like not everyone works at 16, but most people work at 16. And men already see from 16 to 18, you can see an increase on salary. And then there's just that steady increase until 54. And that usually makes it so that men reach an average salary of $56,000 a year between 45 and 54. On the other hand, women see their salaries increase much slower than men, and they earn the most around age 44. The average nationally, though, these statistics are from the Bureau of Labor from a study in 2018, and the average earnings that women were making at 44 is actually below $50,000. So while men, are able to reach that average salary of 56K within that, 9-10 year age period, women are going to reach their peak salaries earlier, and also they're going to be less. So another thing that compounds this issue is that women spend less time overall in the workforce compared to men. And this just, again, is because women are often primary caregivers for children and other family members. We see a lot of women, especially with the COVID pandemic, that were in this kind of sandwich role where they were, caring for older loved ones and then also caring for children. And a lot of women, that was all they were doing during the pandemic, was just making sure that folks in their households were taken care of. And so rising costs for childcare also contributes to this issue, because more women look to opt for part-time jobs or drop out of the workforce completely, because daycare costs can be just so expensive that the point of working almost is about the same amount of money that you'd be spending on childcare during the day. And so that complicates things a lot. Furthermore, during COVID, and there have been a million articles about this. If you want to read more about it, just Google it, it's everywhere. Women spent an average of almost 2 hours per day caring for children as their main activity. And this was an increase. It's not a huge increase from 2019, but it was an increase. And men spent the same amount of time, 46 minutes on average, on these tasks in both 2019 and 2020. So, well, a lot of women had to pick up slack because COVID happened. A lot of men were able to still participate in the workforce, not having to necessarily participate in child care tasks as much as women would. Sorry. Okay, and then we get to something I'm sure all of you know, is that the fact that men and women are not paid equally. And the pay gap has luckily decreased over the past few years, especially since the 2000s. But in 1980, women earned 64 cents to every dollar men earned. So that is, that's almost half the amount of money that a man is earning. And if you are, let's say you enter the workforce as a woman at 22, right? And you work your entire life in 1980. You work your entire life, 22, and during that time, you're earning almost half as much as your male counterparts. At the end of your time working, you are going to have less money saved up because you're just earning less. And so that is a huge issue too. And women are oftentimes have longer lifespans. And so that it makes it an issue in trying to save for retirement, and making sure there's enough money. So it all kind of just, all of the issues kind of compound each other. And so while there has been progress, we're not at, complete equal yet. And in 2018, women earned 85 cents to every dollar men earned, which is slightly better, but still missing out on a ton of income over, the course of, let's say, a 40-year work span. The pay gap is also exacerbated by race, and this is a crazy statistic. I think it takes 19 months for a Black woman with the same education to earn as much as a white man taking home, like in 1 year, in a 12-month period. That's almost 2 years, which is just a staggering statistic. So we can see that there's the issue of historic unequal pay, women having just all sorts of responsibilities for childcare and other caregiving, and then also not earning as much as men historically. That has led to just unequal wealth between men and women. But the racial wealth gap also makes this worse, and that's because the median household wealth for a white family in 2018 in the United States was $134,000 compared to $11,000 for a Black family. And the wealth gap stems from racist, discriminatory histories that we have with redlining and being unable to use programs like the GI Bill and the continued prevalence of segregation. And I forgot to put this on the slides, but the pay gap and wealth gap also varies depending on where you live in the country. So let's say you live in Louisiana. In Louisiana, you are going to have a much larger gap in wealth than compared to California. And so it also makes a difference where you're born, where you live, where you're able to go in all of these things. Another issue is that women have historically been excluded from positions of institutional power when we're not able to run for elected office, or were prevented from being elected to office for a long part of our history. And once they were elected to office, even then the representation has not ever been equal in terms of men to women in institutional powers. So when the decision-making power is left up to someone else and they're making decisions in their best interest, oftentimes women got left out. And when they did achieve positions of power, they faced major obstacles to creating change. And one of the most prominent obstacles I can think of in the early 1900s in Colorado, there was a woman named Helen Ring Robinson, and she was the first woman to serve in the Colorado General Assembly, the second woman to serve in any General Assembly in the United States. And while she was there, while she was serving in the Colorado General Assembly, she tried to pass all sorts of legislation to promote equal pay, protect immigrants, protect those that have mental illness, and was pretty much stonewalled at every point she turned to. But the one thing that really stuck out to me from that was she tried to pass a bill that would set a minimum wage for working women, and was blocked at every single point. And I just think about that often, and truly wonder what our society would look like if a minimum wage had been passed for women in the early 1900s in even one place in the United States, and how that would have, maybe we'd be in a different place today. So that is just one part of, one woman's story. And there are countless others that have similar. But another part of this also was women weren't able to serve on juries until 1940. And that's, if you're not able to have power in those scenarios either, that also exacerbates this. And women were not able to access wealth the same way that men were able to access wealth. And I know we all know this, but women were unable to open their own bank accounts, take out a loan, or access credit without their husband's permission until the 1970s. And in the 1970s, we do see this movement of banks for women popping up. There was one in Denver, it was called the Women's Bank, but it is not, it wasn't super prevalent. And in the late 1970s, eventually women were able to, and not in all places, but in some places were able to take out loans and get credit cards without their husband's permission. But property ownership, and I know we're throwing it back to the 1890s, history plays a huge role in all of this, and the historic ways that women and people of color have been discriminated against plays a huge role in the wage, pay, and wealth gaps that exist today. Learning opportunities are also different, and I know I mentioned this in the beginning, but boys and girls receiving primary school education oftentimes are told to make career choices based on gender. Many times boys are pushed to engage in sciences and math, while girls are pushed to engage in childcare and education. And I'm sure we all know this too, but a college degree in some sciences can get a six-figure salary just right out of school. And education, becoming a teacher, caregiving, becoming a nurse, that is not going to have the same pay. So that is another, just the way that we're told to participate in the workforce is different. And then that leads to outcomes where pay ends up being totally different too. And there has been progress, especially in the past few years, in trying to introduce more girls to science and math, because it's an effort to reduce the pay and education gap. But there's just so much more work that can be done, of course, with all of these things. But seeing that progress in STEM and the engagement with women in STEM, etc., has been really wonderful to see. So what now? I just threw a ton of statistics at you, and they're baffling numbers, but what are you going to do with it? First, encourage girls and women in your life to engage in personal finances and explore their interests, because even if they've been taught, the basics of personal finance, there's probably a bit of education that has been skipped over. For me, it was investing. I never learned anything about investing until I figured it out for myself, because that was just not something my parents were like, you don't need to know that, right? And I do. Everyone should know a little bit about it. So allow them to explore their interests, that, and make it so it's not, it is gender inclusive, right? If a girl is really loves science and math, let her love science and math and foster that as much as you can. If you still work, talk to your coworkers about how much you each make. I know it's like the most taboo possible thing you can do is asking someone how much money they make, but it is a great way to be aware of and close any pay gaps that might exist. And this is how I have a few friends that have done this in their workplaces and have figured out that they've been paid, they get paid 18% less than their male counterpart that does the exact same work. And then they're able to go to their boss and say, what's going on with this? Or people higher up in the company, and actually create change and try to close that gap. If you are the primary person that's responsible for childcare or other caregiving duties, talk to whoever helps you out and see if there's a way where duties can be split more equally. And a lot of times with caregiving, especially, it's very easy to spend our personal dollars because we're helping out our family, we're helping out our loved one. And a lot of times, because women are the ones in the caregiving roles, they spend up to $8,000 or more a year on average out of their own pocket in caregiving. So it might not be upfront financial assistance, or that the care, well, you might still be doing physical care. Maybe there's a way that someone helping you out and can help with finances or help with another part of the care experience. And that's really truly for childcare or other caregiving duties too. And lastly, it is never too late to start saving. People think that all the time. It's never too late to start saving. It's never too late to start investing. And it's never too late to learn more about all of these things, but finances too. And so I urge you to take this information out into the world and hopefully use it to just get the pay gap a little closer to being closed. I'm happy to take questions if you want to throw them in the chat. I do have a few resources. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau just has great resources on budgeting. They also have a really amazing guide on managing someone else's money for caregivers out there. AARP has an entire section on money and information on budgeting, savings, investing, everything under the sun. There's also interactive tools you can use for planning that are really great. So feel free to check that out. Again, our phone number for Elder Watch is 800-222-4444, option number 2. So write it down, it might come in handy someday. And then Stop Fraud Colorado is the Attorney General's website that has a plethora of fraud prevention resources. So feel free to check that out as well. I don't see any questions, but I'm happy to give you all a minute to collect your thoughts. If there are none, I will give you a few minutes of your day back, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our presentation today. And yes, if you want the slides, I will send those your way. I see, Julie, I have your email and I will send those your way too. Karen, we do presentations about once a week on various topics. If you have a group that let's say you really like this presentation, thanks. And you have a group that we want to present to, we're happy to come do that for them. And we're also able to travel now and do non-virtual programs. I will send slides to you, Melinda. Thank you all so much again. Have a good rest of your day.